Have you ever stopped in the absolute stillness of the night and wondered why your life looks exactly the way it does right now? Every single triumph that made your heart race, every devastating failure that left you staring at the ceiling, every fleeting moment of pure joy, and every suffocating pocket of grief. They are not random accidents of fate. We are conditioned to believe that the world happens to us, that we are merely leaves swept away by a chaotic wind. But the haunting truth is far more terrifying and liberating. Your thoughts are actively carving out your destiny. Whether your ultimate desire is to build an empire of unimaginable wealth or to simply find a quiet, unshakable sanctuary of peace within your own soul, the genesis of that reality begins in one solitary, unseen coordinate system: your mindset. Think deeply about the terrifyingly beautiful split in human nature. Why is it that when faced with the exact same catastrophic storm, one person uncovers a hidden golden opportunity, while another completely unravels into panic? Why do some human beings allow the icy paralysis of failure to permanently freeze them in place, while an elite few convert that exact same failure into a raw, burning fuel that makes them utterly invincible? The difference is never external. It is the silent, invisible blueprint running in the background of their consciousness. The most extraordinary individuals to ever walk this earth do not possess a secret monopoly on money, resources, or raw genetic talent. What separates them from the masses is an uncompromising, highly calibrated internal architecture. This is an invitation into the uncharted, deeply mysterious universe of the human mind. A realm capable of completely realigning the trajectory of your career, your financial destiny, your deepest relationships, and your personal growth with almost magical precision. Close your eyes and project yourself just a few years into the future, visualizing yourself living a life so profoundly rich and fulfilled that it feels like a dream. You have secured everything you ever desperately prayed for, but now look closer at that future version of you. How do they think? How do they react to pressure? And what is the exact texture of their psychological resolve? That precise, elevated state of consciousness is exactly what is being handed to you right now. A master key to identifying and violently breaking free from the suffocating prison of your limiting beliefs, so you can finally smile directly into the face of adversity. This is not a collection of cheap, toxic positivity or abstract, useless academic theories. It is a battle-tested, step-by-step psychological rewiring process containing practical exercises designed to systematically destroy your fear of challenges and transform them into aggressive stepping stones. From the relentless empire building of Bill Gates and Elon Musk to the profound emotional resonance of Oprah Winfrey and J.K. Rowling, every single historical icon has achieved absolute mastery over one singular domain: the terrifying strength of their mindset. They did not survive their massive rejections by luck. They meticulously studied the anatomy of failure until they learned how to transform agonizing rejection into an obsession for greatness and convert rock-bottom moments into unbreakable platforms. You possess the exact same latent capacity for psychological alchemy, but you have been wandering without a precise map, which is why you must now shift your perspective to view every agonizing micro-problem and massive macro-challenge as a beautifully disguised opportunity. If you are truly ready to drag your wildest dreams out of the ether of imagination and anchor them into the cold, hard fabric of reality, you must listen to this with an intensity you have never summoned before. Welcome to a complete psychological rebirth, a clean slate, and the dawn of an entirely new tier of human achievement. If you are part of the rare, uncompromising 1% of humanity refuse to live a mediocre life, signal your commitment immediately by locking in your focus and declaring internally that your time has officially arrived. Prepare yourself completely, because the hidden mechanisms of reality you are about to decode will ensure that your existence will never, ever be the same again. What is the actual, measurable weight of a properly calibrated mindset? And how can a mere shift in internal perception carry enough kinetic energy to completely shatter and rebuild a person's entire physical reality? Your mindset is not a passive collection of thoughts. It is the highly specialized, polarizing lens through which you filter every sensory input, formulate every belief, and execute every critical reaction under pressure. To truly comprehend how this silent internal engine wields the godlike power to alter a human life, we must step out of abstract theory and dissect the brutal, real-world anatomy of individuals who used it to bend reality to their will. Consider the psychological blueprint of Apple co-founder Steve Jobs, a man whose unique perspective allowed him to see a completely different reality than the rest of the world, making him one of the most creatively dominant figures in human history. When the devastating year of 1985 arrived, and Jobs was violently excommunicated from the very company he built with his own blood and sweat, the psychological shockwave would have permanently broken a lesser human being. Yet, instead of internalizing the eviction as a fatal, identity-crushing failure, Jobs executed a masterclass in cognitive reframing, later stating that being fired was the ultimate liberation that allowed him to enter one of the most intensely creative periods of his entire life. This specific, high-level mindset shift directly birthed Pixar and Next, forcing Apple to ultimately realize they were completely blind without his visionary light, and ultimately leading to his triumphant return to rescue the empire. If Steve Jobs had surrendered to the narrative that his life was over, the world would have never witnessed the revolutionary inception of Pixar, the modern smartphone, or the technological renaissance that reshaped human communication. His mindset was a living shield that reframed a humiliating public execution into a blank canvas for a spectacular resurrection, proving that the true, terrifying power of human consciousness only becomes visible when you train yourself to see opportunities where others see an absolute dead end. There is an ancient, haunting parable passed down through generations that perfectly crystallizes this internal warfare, detailing an old wise man explaining to his grandson the volatile nature of the human psyche. He told the boy that there are two ferocious wolves locked in a perpetual bloody combat inside every single human being. One wolf is bloated with negativity, paralyzing fear, jealousy, and dark insecurity, while the other wolf is radiant with courage, optimism, deep love, and relentless growth. The young boy looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and anxiety, and asked the definitive question, "Grandfather, which wolf ultimately wins the fight?" The old man smiled faintly and whispered the chilling truth. "The one you feed." This timeless truth dictates that your dominant life experience is never a reflection of external circumstances, but a direct result of which psychological wolf you choose to sustain with your daily attention. To navigate this internal battlefield, you must understand that modern psychology categorizes the human mindset into two distinct, fundamentally opposed operating systems: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Individuals trapped within the rigid confines of a fixed mindset believe with absolute certainty that their intelligence, talents, and fundamental abilities are completely carved in stone. Unchangeable, static traits that can never be expanded. Because of this deeply toxic belief, they view every challenge as a dangerous threat to their identity, flee from failure with intense anxiety, and view constructive criticism as a deeply personal, insulting attack. If a person with a fixed mindset attempts public speaking and falters, they immediately internalize a permanent label, telling themselves they lack the generic talent for it, effectively paralyzing their personal evolution forever. Conversely, those who operate on the luminous frequencies of a growth mindset know that any skill, no matter how complex or intimidating, can be systematically developed through calculated practice, deep learning, and relentless consistency. These individuals do not merely tolerate challenges, they run toward them with a sense of thrill, studying their failures like scientists and viewing every single critique as a priceless data point for self-correction. Look at Michael Jordan, a human being brutally cut from his high school varsity basketball team, who used that devastating rejection not as a reason to quit, but as a burning mandate to outwork every person on earth until he became an immortal legend. If you are ready to violently shift your consciousness away from the suffocating stagnation of a fixed mentality and step into the limitless arena of a growth mindset, you must immediately implement 3 precise, non-negotiable psychological strategies. The first strategy is ruthless self-reflection. You must become a detached observer of your own mind and analyze exactly how you react the moment you strike a devastating failure. Do you curl inward, treating the setback as an absolute verdict on your worth? Or do you immediately dissect the wreckage to find the exact variable you need to optimize? The second strategy demands that you completely abolish outcome-based goals and replace them with deeply immersive, learning-oriented goals. Stop obsessing over the vain desire to merely be the top scorer or the highest earner. Instead, recalibrate your objective to deeply mastering the core concepts and mechanics of the craft, which naturally keeps your psychological focus anchored to growth rather than anxiety. The third strategy requires you to completely detach your ego from reality and view harsh criticism exclusively as highly valuable objective feedback. When someone highlights a glaring flaw in your execution, a growth mindset prevents you from becoming defensive or emotional. Instead, it recognizes that targeted critique is the fastest, most direct acceleration tool toward absolute mastery. An extraordinarily powerful mindset will effortlessly transport your life into dimensions of success that your current self is completely incapable of even conceptualizing, because it systematically reprograms your brain to perceive every crisis as a beautifully tailored invitation to evolve. Steve Jobs beautifully summarized this elite psychological posture when he noted that true innovation is merely the rare ability to perceive rapid, chaotic change as a magnificent opportunity, never as an existential threat. When you allow this profound truth to sink deep into the marrow of your bones, you realize that your environment holds zero objective power over you. The true locus of control exists entirely within your filtered perception of that environment. Change the internal programming of your thoughts, and the outer matrix of your life will violently and beautifully realign itself to match that new internal frequency. Let us dive even deeper into the stark, terrifying contrast between these two mindsets by observing a tale of two childhood friends, Arjun and Samir, who grew up in the exact same village, attended the exact same school, and shared an identical, burning passion for art. When their school hosted a massive, highly competitive drawing championship, both boys poured their entire souls into their canvases. Yet when the final verdicts were handed down, both of them suffered a heartbreaking defeat. Arjun, whose psyche was quietly governed by a rigid, fixed mindset, stared at his losing canvas and internalized a devastating narrative. I am simply not a naturally gifted artist, and no amount of agonizing work will ever change my lack of talent. Overwhelmed by shame and a sense of futility, he permanently laid down his brushes, choosing to live a safe, small life, while his artistic dreams withered into bitter regret. Samir, however, possessed a fiercely radiant growth mindset. He looked at his defeat not as a permanent label, but as a temporary diagnostic report telling himself, I am not skilled enough yet, but if I study the masters and practice relentlessly, victory is inevitable. He transformed his heartbreak into an intensive daily ritual of deliberate practice, refining his technique for hours under the flickering light of a candle until his skill reached breathtaking levels. Years later, Samir stood under the brilliant lights of elite galleries as a globally celebrated, highly successful artist, while Arjun could only watch from the shadows of a life unfulfilled, a brutal testament to how two identical talents can be driven to opposite ends of destiny purely by the hidden software of their mindsets. Look at the iconic legacy of Colonel Sanders, a man whose name is globally synonymous with fast food dominance, yet whose path to empire was paved with an agonizing mountain of rejection that would have crushed ordinary men. Colonel Sanders did not launch his global franchise in the fresh prime of his youth. He weaponized his ambition at the age of 65, standing on the precipice of retirement with nothing but a meager social security check and a solitary chicken recipe. He drove across the country, sleeping in his car, knocking on the doors of over 1,000 restaurants, only to be rejected a staggering 1,009 times by owners who laughed directly in his face. A fixed mindset would have easily concluded, after the 100th rejection, that the recipe was worthless and that a 65-year-old man had no business chasing empires, forcing him to die in obscure poverty. But Sanders possessed an indomitable growth mindset that viewed every single brutal no as nothing more than a necessary mathematical variable clearing the path toward an inevitable yes. His relentless, burning perseverance ultimately forced the world to yield, birthing the global empire of KFC and proving that an elite, growth-oriented mind can completely reinvent an industry even in the twilight years of life. To unlock this exact same level of reality-bending potential within yourself, you must aggressively master the art of positive self-talk, violently intercepting every internal whisper of, "I can't do this," and replacing it with the unshakable declaration, "I may not know how to do this yet, but I am entirely capable of learning it." To ensure this mental transformation becomes a permanent reality, you must deliberately align yourself with the psychological forces of visualization, a highly sophisticated neurological technique where you vividly construct the absolute reality of your success within your mind, long before it manifests in the physical world. This is not casual, weak daydreaming. It is a structured, hyper-detailed mental simulation where you force your brain to experience the exact sounds, textures, emotions, and atmosphere of your ultimate victory until your nervous system cannot tell the difference between imagination and reality. Consider the legendary psychological experiment conducted by the iconic actor Jim Carrey, who in the early 1990s was completely broke, deeply depressed, and stranded on the cold fringes of Hollywood with no clear path to success. Refusing to allow his bleak physical reality to dictate his internal state, he took a blank check and wrote it out to himself for the staggering sum of $10 million for services rendered as an actor, dating it for Thanksgiving 1995. For years, he kept that deteriorating check tucked away in his wallet, driving up to the dark, scenic overlooks of Sunset Boulevard every single night to close his eyes and intensely visualize directors praising his genius and handing him that exact amount of money. By the time 1994 drew to a close and Carrey was cast in the smash hit Dumb and Dumber, the studio executives formally signed a contract awarding him a historic salary of exactly $10 million, a precise, terrifying materialization of the exact mental blueprint he had burned into his subconscious mind for years. Visualization operates as a literal cybernetic programming language for your brain. When you visualize your triumph with microscopic clarity and fuse it with intense, burning emotion, your subconscious mind automatically accepts it as an absolute truth. It begins scanning your environment with hypervigilance, firing up your reticular activating system to spot hidden connections, resources, and brilliant strategies that an ordinary, uncalibrated mind would remain completely blind to. To implement this elite mental exercise, you must dedicate 10 uninterrupted minutes every single night before sleep to close your eyes, quiet your breathing, and step directly into the shoes of your future, extraordinarily successful self. Do not merely look at the screen of your mind. Feel the heavy weight of the success. Hear the genuine respect in the voices of your peers. Taste the absolute freedom of financial independence. And let the intoxicating chemistry of gratitude flood your physical body. Yet, you must recognize a critical, unshakable law of reality. Visualization without aggressive, relentless, and systematic action is nothing more than a delusional hallucination. The supreme convergence of human potential only occurs when your crystal-clear internal vision is backed by an unyielding, daily commitment to hard, physical execution under pressure. This brings us to the final, most sacred pillar of a truly elite mindset: the concept of radical, unbreakable resilience, the terrifying capacity to endure repeated, bone-crushing failures and still rise with more ferocity than before. Think of Thomas Edison executing over 10,000 failed experiments in his obsessive quest to conquer darkness with the incandescent light bulb. Looking at a worried colleague and famously proclaiming that he had not failed a single time. but had simply uncovered 10,000 ways that would not work. This is the exact, unshakable psychological armor that Michael Jordan wore when he reminded the world that his historic, legendary status was built entirely upon a mountain of missed game-winning shots, lost games, and agonizing failures. When you decide that failure is nothing more than an essential cost of admission for greatness, you become entirely unkillable in the arena of life. You realize that the exact moment you refuse to give up is the exact moment you force the universe to yield to your absolute will. Sit in the profound, echoing silence of this realization. Guard this newly awakened consciousness with your very life. Step boldly into the chaotic storm of existence and relentlessly execute your destiny until the entire world has no choice but to bow to your vision.